Welcome to the Insurance Lab, where we explore the journeys of extraordinary leaders who have mastered the art of influence, branding, and leadership. Today, we have a guest whose career spans from working with legendary entertainers to coaching high-powered executives. Judy Jernudd started her career in PR working with none other than Liberace. Yes, the man who defines showmanship. She then became a television journalist, interviewing icons like Oprah Winfrey, Bill Clinton, and Tom Cruise before taking her expertise into the business world. Today, she's the founder of the Jernudd Company and COBE, helping leaders sharpen their executive presence, build powerful brands, and elevate their influence. She's an amazing person and a good friend.
Delighted to be here with you, Ben. Thanks for inviting me.
Judy, I was looking forward to this all day because we can talk about a lot of different topics, and you have a lot to share. And, I was thinking where to start, with your journey. And I guess maybe let's just start from the beginning, right? You told me the story about working with your mom and working in the restaurant. Let's let people know how you did that.
Well, you mentioned a few words like influence and then working with high-powered people. And I really do believe, and those of you, who's listening, who are watching us right now, have children, those early influencers just so valuable because, we all talk about influencers today, but that early influence, and my mother did, she bought a restaurant, and you have a good memory, we had this in private conversations, but she bought a restaurant when I was 12, and so she put me in salads, which I thought was very cool because I had a title. I was 12 years old, and I was the salad girl, and all my other friends were babysitters, so I thought this was very cool. The only thing is it only lasted 2 weeks, and then I told my mother I needed a promotion, and she said, "Where do you think you're going?" And I said, "Out in front with you with the customers." And she goes, no, you're just a little girl. Well, even if you don't have children, you were a child, you know how persistent children can be. And so I kept on it until finally 2 weeks later, she said, "Jude, you're just a little girl. You're too little to wait on customers." And I said, "Well, Mother, if I'm big enough to make their salad, don't you think I'm big enough to take it to them?" So Mother had no recourse but to let me. And then the following summer, I took over for her and her other server. And then when I was 16, she bought a second restaurant, and she gave me that restaurant to manage. So that really started everything because I got to meet such high-level customers coming in. It was in a resort area, and they'd come in with their yachts and all of that. So I had to deal with a lot of different personalities. And, Ben, it's interesting because my mother's heard me talk about this on stage, and she said, "I've thought about that over the years. That was an awful lot of responsibility to give a 16-year-old. And I said, "Mother, you made other mistakes. That wasn't one of them." Because really, Ben, as you know, when you can relate to a lot of different people, and you can get along with people, and you can manage people. I always joke, and it's true, though, really. I said everybody in that restaurant was older, and I'm sure a whole lot wiser, but nonetheless, there I was running that restaurant. And so I think that work ethic and public relations and just knowing how to make people happy and how to keep your customers coming back for more and what they like and being really particular with them and knowing if you came in, I'd know that Ben likes his coffee just like this and when he wants it and all of that after a while. So it really taught me a lot so customer service to me is just not 2 words. I just really live it. And then being able to work with high-level people, that's where I think that all started.
Right, because you learn how to relate to human beings, right? You learned how to speak with people. Maybe they're not from the same background as you, but you learned that, there's commonalities to having conversation with human beings that you learn at a restaurant.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
now, flash forward from then, 16, lots of responsibility, to you're out of school, you're starting your working career. Tell me a little bit about that process and where you started.
I'm going to go back to the restaurant just for a minute because some people who owned, like there was one gentleman, he had stores in Chicago, retail stores. Now, by this time I was probably 16, and when we met him, when he became a customer, and he talked to my parents if he could hire me when I got out of high school to come and sell at his stores. Now, you're into sales, so
Right.
You would appreciate this.
Right.
And, of course, my parents said, no, she's going to school, so that's not going to happen, and she's not going to Chicago. And so I had a couple of different offerings like that for sales, and I think that gave me the courage, and especially out of state. I'm from the Midwest, as you know. And it gave me the courage to think and to know that there's another world out there, other than the world that I knew in a small town growing up in the Midwest. So that's kind of where that all began.
And there was never any fear of leaving, too. It seems like that was ingrained.
Yes and no, except I was really close to my mother. And so I cried when I came out to California, so did she, and I came out when I was I was 18 or 19, something like that. And so, but I still love the Midwest. That's where I grew. That's where I learned a lot of values. And I love, California too, and Los Angeles, and where I've been and what I've learned since then. But it was hard to leave my mother, but I would see her all the time. So I would go back and see her all the time. So, yeah.
And then, so you're out of school, you're starting your career. and you started your career in public relations, correct?
I did. And in Liberace's public relations office. And you talk about culture shock. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, small town, and then Liberace's, I mean, the flamboyance that you saw was nothing. I mean, going to his house, I remember the first time I was at one of the parties in his home, and we went upstairs for some, I don't know why we're upstairs looking into all his clothes, but we were up there looking at his wardrobe. And I mean, he had all these elaborate rhinestone, probably diamonds for all I know, but they were so beautiful, all these suits and all this. And I thought it was just such a different world to be in a showbiz world. And then we'd go over to Las Vegas when he'd be opening up and, doing when he was going to open up there and, on one of the main stages. And we'd go over and see those shows and go in the night before and see the closing act and deal with all the media from national and international. It was really quite a heady experience for a young girl.
How old were you?
I was probably by that time, I was all of 21 maybe, I think. So maybe 20, maybe 21.
So early 20s, girl from the Midwest, then all of a sudden you're with one of the most flamboyant, interesting marketers, right, of personal branding early before that was actually a thing. And you're working and you're living in this world. What was that like when you called home? Did you talk to your parents? Was it so foreign that it was just? How did that work?
Well, you're right on so many accounts there, and I'm going to kind of take you through it. Excuse me. First of all, it was a shock, culture shock. That's the first thing. And then second, I learned so much from Liberace that I wish I had been older to be more insightful. I wasn't doing television at that time because there were so many more questions I would ask. I mean, for one thing, I learned about competition. I mean, he didn't compete with other pianists. He competed with himself. So after an engagement or a big publicity push or whatever, then we would have a post-meeting, and Liberace would say, he said, now, how am I going to top that next time? I mean, it was always like, what's next? Where am I going with this? And here's one thing I really hope that everyone watching us and listening to this podcast really understands this, that he knew, and this is so important for you because he knew right away, early on, he was certainly an acceptable, okay pianist, classical pianist. However, he knew that he would be all right there, and he'd make a very good living and was certainly known. But what he really was, deep down, and you and I have talked about this off interview, that he was a showman. He was an entertainer, and hence he had, the moniker Mr. Showmanship. He knew that he belonged out of not just playing what was expected of a classical pianist. He really wanted to put on a show every time he performed, and he did. And as I said, he always looked forward to how he's going to top himself next time.
Did he teach you any life lessons? Did he have any insight? Did you have conversations with him?
I didn't have conversations with him about that because I was just not mature enough, at that time, and I wasn't interviewing people, and I didn't have that skill yet. But I just from observation. And I can remember, this is youth for you. We'd go over to Las Vegas, and he'd go into all these rehearsals, and I would say to the owner of the agency, well, he already knows all these songs. Why is he doing all these rehearsals? He knows all what he's going to play and what he's going to do, all the music. And he said, because he's a pro. That's why he does it. And I didn't get that then. And then also you learn that, this is really key too. You know about COBE, our collaboration of brilliant entrepreneurs. Well, we focus a lot on what we call IQG, innate quality and genius. And that's what Liberace had, his innate quality and genius. And he worked in that all the time, meaning that, he didn't go in and set up the lighting or move the piano or tune the piano. So
right.
He did what he did best and delegated all the rest. Now, I didn't know those were lifelong lessons, and he didn't sit down and talk to me about it. But I watched what he was doing and how professional he was and how he wanted everything just right. And how he wasn't concerned about the competition and knowing who he was so early on in his career. Those were lessons that I take to my clients, both in COBE, whether it's entrepreneurs I'm working with or C-suite executives. I take those same principles that started back in my parents' restaurant and also with Liberace, who at that time was the most significant person household name person, I ever worked with.
It's interesting. You got a master class in how to be a professional.
Yeah, I never thought about it, but you're absolutely right.
And, the parallels to successful business leaders, very similar in a sense, right? Do what you do really well, excel at it, try to delegate to people to take care of some of the items that maybe you're not as good at, or it's not worth your time.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, as you know, I mean, you're with Heffernan and your role with the company, you have a lot of personalities and a lot of people with whom you deal, not just internally but externally. You know, your team and your clients. You really need to be able to relate to a lot of different people.
Yes.
And I think that came from that really early age experience from both the restaurant and then with Liberace. You know, it was just phenomenal.
It sounds like he had really high emotional IQ.
He did.
He did.
Yeah, actually, you know, it's really interesting because fast forward. So I was in his PR firm, and then when I went on television, it would turn out. I mean, it would just come full circle. I would be the reporter, the entertainment reporter here in Los Angeles, who did his obituary, you know, on our station. And I had such stories and such. The news director called me and he said, "How did you know all these things?" He didn't know I'd worked with Lee, and he said, "How did you know all these things? And where did you get that footage?" I said, "Oh, it pays to know people in high places." but I had footage of him talking about how he wanted to be remembered and what he wanted to do. And what people didn't know about Liberace is that he really was a very kind person. I mean, it came across that he loved what he was doing, and he was kind to people in his audience when he would have conversations with them. But he was really a kind, gentle man. And I don't know that a lot of people know that.
That's interesting. How was the portrayal in the Michael Douglas movie? How did he do a good job?
You know, I watched that, and it's not the Liberace I know.
As often is the case.
Yeah,
with,
it just wasn't the
biopics.
Liberace I know. And so they talked to me about it, the producers, and they said it's an expose, and I said not interested. So you know, that's not the Liberace I knew.
This makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did you transition from PR to being a journalist?
Well, I don't know how you feel about this, Ben, or what your experiences have been, and I know that I'm not interviewing you today, and it's the opposite here.
We're interviewing each other.
But I'll ask you about this. But I mean, I don't know how many things have happened to you in your life that you didn't plan. I did not plan to go on television. That was not my idea. I was in public relations. After a while, I decided, and my boss would say that, the man who owned the agency, he said, Jamie, he said, you know, my name's on the door, but you run this place. And I thought about that, and I kept thinking about it. I thought, well, why don't I just run my own agency then? Then I can do, you know, the kind of clients I want, raise my fees, you know, and all of that. So that's what I did. And then I would have clients on different shows here in Los Angeles where I'd place them. And it was Regis Philbin's executive producer, Beth, who came up to me one day and said, "You are missing the boat. You should be in front of the cameras, not your clients." And then she whipped away. And so I called her the next day and said, "Could we have lunch?" And she said, "Yes, let's have lunch." And I know why. And she said, during lunch, she said, "I'm going to give you an audition. But she said, "We don't need a co-host. Regis has one." But she said, "I think that you would be great on television." And she said, "I want to give you an audition." So she did. And she called me that night at home, and she said, "You're ready for TV." And I said, "Why?" And she went through all these reasons why she thought. And so that's what started my career. And then the whole point of this is that sometimes we don't see in ourselves. This is why people who work with coaches and they work one-on-one for people are really, whether they're advising or consulting, they will see things in us, and just as we do with our clients when we coach, that they've never thought about, that they haven't seen. They'll see potential. They'll see areas. That was not my idea. To backtrack, I had done some acting in L.A., and I had TV commercials, which I liked the residual income, but I didn't love acting, Ben. So when this opportunity, when she said, "You're ready for TV," and I thought, wow, the idea of hosting a show, interviewing people, and having the energy to carry a show, I thought I would love to do that.
Were you surprised when she said you're ready, or did you maybe deep down know it?
I knew it.
You knew it.
I knew it.
Yeah.
But it was. But what I didn't know is to have somebody in that position who'd worked with the best,
right,
say that to me, that was going to happen. I did not know that. I just knew when she said, "You belong in front of the cameras." I knew I didn't love acting, but as I said, the idea of being myself and carrying a show and interviewing people and meeting everybody and having the energy and keeping a pulse on what's going on in the world, I knew I would love that. So,
and where was the first show?
KCBS here in Los Angeles. After Beth, then after that audition with Regis, and then I went over to KCBS because I knew people there too, because having clients on the show, and I said, "Hi, I want to be on TV," and they said, "Yes, well, so do a million other people," and I said, "That's probably true, but I'm going to be," and they called me 3 months later and gave me an audition, and that's what started it. I did 2 weeks guest hosting on KCBS here in Los Angeles for their morning talk. So. And then that led to a national magazine show, and then that led to a live talk show out of state, and then it led to TV news here, entertainment news, and so that's really what started it. I don't know if it hadn't been for that audition and someone taking me aside and saying, you belong in front of the cameras. I mean, it was just with such, if she just was like in my face, and she
Right.
whipped away. So my point here is that, I love the story because it's what happened. But we all have, I think, so much greater potential of things we hadn't even thought about that other people see in us. So I encourage us all. I mean, sometimes we have a burning desire, something that you just know, people just say, my husband, for instance, Stan knew at 6 years old he wanted to be a doctor, and he is. And so some people have that really early on, but most of us don't have that kind of really burning desire. But I mean, if you do pursue it, I mean, you and I've told many people, if you've got that desire, do it. But when people see something in you, that's really valuable. And so one of my favorite expressions when I'm speaking on stage, is to say, and I think it's just one of my philosophies, that the door of opportunity is always open. It depends on whether you choose to walk through it or not.
Right. And you're receptive as well. Yeah. I mean, the fact, though, that you were ready for somebody to say that, but you put yourself in that position. And I always try to tell younger people, look for the opportunity, right? And when you see it, grab it. And when somebody sees the potential in you, be receptive, right? I've seen so many times people that they're asking, is there an ulterior motive? They're thinking, and really maybe somebody's just being kind and somebody actually does believe in you.
Oh, that's
right?
it. And so, as I said, sometimes we have that confidence within ourselves, but also have that confidence when someone else sees something into you. And there are some people that opportunities come all the time, and they have chosen not to take it. So, it just depends on what, for me, there's just always, COBE, the slogan is for high achievers who want more. And that's exactly what I believe in. I believe in more. I believe in and we've had these conversations, off camera, off interview, that we like to be around people who get it. People who are just growing and learning and smart and some of the smartest, most successful people I've ever met. It's almost like, okay, what's next? I mean, they're never just, I spoke one time on stage and my theme song was a rock and roll conference and in New York. I mean, that was the theme. It wasn't a rock and roll conference, but that was the theme. And I thought, well, I'm going to choose a theme. My theme for my part of this is going to be the Stones. I can't get no satisfaction. So that was my theme. And I wrote some words for it that matched the volume, that matched the music. But that's how I feel. I feel, okay, I've done this. This is great. Enjoy it. Now what? What's next? And so that's kind of how I liked. And I like to be around people who are like that.
It's interesting. Have you found that interesting people seem to find interesting people?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's and I think we're on the lookout. They're engaging, they're interesting, they make you a better human being, right? The fact that you and I, the way we met, was just a crazy story. I accidentally called you. I called somebody else, not you.
You thought you were calling
someone else. I thought I was
calling
you, but I remembered you. That's the thing. I remembered having that conversation. I found you really interesting. Does any interview stand out?
Yes. One of my first. It was with First Live, Jacques Cousteau. Oh, no, it wasn't live. It was tape to hold, sorry. It was a tape here. My first show, when KCBS gave me the opportunity to work on their morning show for 2 weeks while their host was on vacation. I was interviewing Jacques Cousteau's son. And it was really early on. I hadn't done anything yet except some TV commercials.
What year is this?
I have no idea. But when I first started. And I have to go back and look at everything. But I remember he said to me, we had a technical difficulty, so they had to stop us for about 15 or 20 minutes. And he said, I just want to know. He said, how do you know so much about me? And this was pre-internet, by the way, where you could just type in someone's name and get volumes of material or go to Chat or Perplexity or someplace. And he said, how do you know so much about me? And I said, well, I researched. And so I had somewhere to go. I said, in case you didn't answer my questions, then I had more questions that I could ask you. So in case you gave me yes or no answers, I didn't know what this was going to be. So I just had a lot of research. And he made me the compliment, and that was really, really encouraging to me. He said, I've been on a lot of talk shows. His dad was very famous. And he said, I've been on a lot of talk shows, a lot of news programs. He said, no one has asked me the questions you've asked me today. And so that gave me a lot of confidence, number one, because I hadn't done it before. And number two, I also realized that homework, do your homework. So if you're going on a job interview or you're going into a big meeting or you're meeting with a potential new client or whatever, do your homework. And today with the internet, it is just so easy. There's just no reason not to. And so that was really encouraging to me.
Sometimes it feels like cheating that you can get so much good information before you even meet somebody. It's like it's an embarrassment of riches.
It is, and at the same time, if people, and I really encourage this, by the way, pay attention to what people say in an interview, because you may say something today. If I were interviewing you, if the tables were turned, and I might ask you a couple questions here or there, but if the tables were turned, and I were asking you questions, you might say to me, "Gee, no one's ever asked me that before." That's what you look for, in an interview. It's not so that you probably won't get on Chat or Perplexity or Claude or any of the. But you're right. I mean, it makes it so easy.
Right,
today.
but it gives you breadcrumbs to ask those questions.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Because they may talk about something I've never heard about before. They may find so much on you that's never been in the news or never been published before, and they go, "Oh, I didn't know that Ben was an avid car collector." Well, so was one of my, and then you've got some kind of rapport, there.
So, does anything stand out about something that you learned about somebody you were interviewing that surprised you?
I have to think about that a minute. I know that I really don't. I don't know if I have a good answer for that, because I don't know that people always surprise me, because they'll always say something but just to think of one in particular. But people will always say something that I will say this about that part, though, is that I used to watch interviews, and you could tell that people would have 10 questions prepared. And no matter what you answered, Ben, they were going to ask those 10 questions.
Right.
And so they really wouldn't pay any attention to what you said. So I just know over the career, there isn't one that stands out in particular. But over my interviewing career, somebody would say something that I'd say, "I didn't know you did that." Or, "When did that happen?" That's never been talked about, but I don't remember anyone in particular. But it would happen quite frequently, because people are more interesting than any research you do on them, always.
Anybody on the wish list that you wish that you would have interviewed, or somebody alive right now?
Yeah. I wish that I had been in my career enough to have interviewed Jacqueline Kennedy.
Interesting. What?
Yeah, I mean, I was in my career, but she was so elusive, as you know, for interviews, and I was so fascinated with her because I was, little young when she was in the White House, and she had all that glamour, and she was young, and all those things, and such style, and the Camelot thing, and all of that. But she didn't do interviews very often. I mean, rarely did she do an interview. And Mike Wallace, the legend from 60 Minutes, they were social friends. He said, but yet I never could ask her for an interview.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. I mean, because she just didn't do interviews, and I mean, she was almost. I know we throw the word around a lot, royalty, but they really were perceived as royalty at that time. As I mentioned, Camelot. But he just didn't want to infringe on the friendship. To say, would you do an interview? Because she probably would have said no anyway. And so, but she just didn't do interviews. But I would love to have interviewed her, and still to this day, if I'm watching something on television, I will say, why didn't they ask? And that's the other thing. You want to ask the questions that you, especially with somebody who's a big name person or they've been in the news or whatever, you want to ask the questions that people at home who are listening, driving in their car or watching it, watching a podcast like this, you want to ask questions that you think the audience would like to know.
Right. This makes a lot of sense. You could also, it's appropriate, though, that we're talking about her. The tapes were released, or the data was released this week. Yeah. I have not read anything about it at all. Have you?
I saw one blurb on the internet, and I don't know how I don't know which part of it, what was out of context. I don't know anything, and so but that's there's just been so much. I was surprised they released those tapes. I mean, those. I guess there's only been, there's supposed to be several thousands of more that have not been released.
Right. I think I 80,000.
Yeah, I think 30 have been released, or 50, and there's 30 or several coming.
That's really, it is really interesting. I'm waiting for somebody to sift through it just to give me the highlights.
Cliff notes.
Give me the Cliff notes on this one, right?
Go to Perplexity or Chat or Claude or one of them. They'll tell you what it's all about.
It's interesting. AI really has changed the way that I work now, in terms of writing, in terms of communicating. Are you seeing any the integration in the business world with the business leaders that you're talking with? Are they any feedback that they're giving you?
I think everybody's trying to find their way with AI. I mean, we all use it for research, writing. I'm designing. Writing.
Claude's great for writing.
Oh my gosh. But yes and no. I mean, yes, it is. Yes, but someone wrote some copy for me the other day, and they said, "What do you think of this?" I said, "I think that Chat wrote it."
Interesting.
He said, "Oh, you might be right about that." I said, "I know." So I think that what I like to do, like say for instance, COBE. If I want to run something in about COBE, marketing materials or something, I'll run that. I'll put our script in, what we've written, our text, and then see what they come up with. That's it. But you can't beat conversational kind of communication. Whether you're
So true.
unless you're writing a medical or a textbook or something like that, it needs to be on that conversational level. And if it's words that you don't use normally, but having said that, they'll give you ideas. I mean, like I'm going to just use COBE as a real life example. They used investment like 3 or 4 times in the 2 or 3 paragraphs that I sent them. Now, I use investment too because you're investing in yourself, your business, your career, but I don't use it every third sentence. They used it a lot, and I thought, well, maybe I should be using this more often, So
Right.
it gave me some thought. But also because of the new book, I wrote what the book was about, and I said, design me a cover. And I gave them a lot. By the way, your prompts, as you know, I mean, the prompts are everything in AI, but to help you get the maximum out of it at the time. And again, even AI experts, they'll say they're just on the tip of this, of where it's going to take us and what we're going to do with it. So I probably am not any more advanced in using it than other people are. But I do use it, like I just said, design me a book cover, and I gave them several things, and I'd say a little too flashy, not enough pizzazz or whatever, and I just wrote in different, and they did about 5, and I said, okay, this gives us some idea, thanks, but it's great for brainstorming, it's boy, if you don't have a huge team and you can't go in and ideate with your team, go to AI, and you're going to find a lot of ideas.
Yeah, I'm curious how it's going to affect executives and executive coaching because, I think that the way that you could make money in the past was being an expert, right? I'm the best insurance broker, around, or I'm the best attorney or best doctor's a little bit different. With all of that information at our fingertips, it's possible that being an expert could be devalued because other individuals can get the same information, but maybe business leaders need to get really good at a number of items utilizing AI. So for example, I'm a great people person and a great leader, but I'm not a great writer, but I can use AI to be a great writer, right? I need to illustrate and get really good at utilizing AI for illustrations. And so for me, I think it's taking advantage of the tools and learning right now as much as you possibly can to see where it's going to take you.
Well, I took one of my friends is doing a master course for people on AI, and I was one of the prototypes. I was invited to watch it and to be a part of it, and I'm having a follow up with him next week. I'm going to fill you in on what happened on this, by the way.
Curious.
So don't forget to remind me. But what he said people think that AI is going to replace people. He said it will in some areas. I mean, we already are seeing that. They're moving equipment. All of those things, boxes, and some of the restaurants are now. There's just a lot of replacement. But he said what's going to happen more than anything is what AI will do is replace people who don't know how to use AI.
Yes.
And he believes that people are going to advance more, and that there'll be a lot of, just like, when the internet came, look how much, it's opened up the world in terms of business opportunities, whereas some things are not like they were before the internet. But now there are people who, look what's happened with tech in Silicon Valley and all across the country, with technology. So it's look at the opportunities that where the internet took us. And he thinks the same thing will happen with AI.
Yeah, it feels like when I was in college in the early 90s, and the first web browser came out, Mosaic, and I remember thinking it was really cool, but I didn't do enough reading on HTML and the Internet 1.0, and I feel that I missed out from a business opportunity, and it feels like now is very similar. And so I've been recommending to people, just even like casual conversations, get on YouTube. Just try to watch like a 15-minute video every night. Just try to learn as much as possible. That's what a good business person would do, right? That sounds like sound advice.
And you mentioned on the coaching part, and I know that you do coaching with your team, your all of your teams, and I don't know how AI is going to fit into that. I mean, I could write a manual today and put it on AI about how to do great presentations, and you would learn a lot. I mean, not just you. I don't mean you in particular, but I mean there would be a lot of do's and don'ts and how to do this and how to make them really, outstanding. You could read that book, and that's kind of how I feel about with some of the coaching part of it. How much of that is that one-on-one? I mean, when you, for instance, I've worked in your company a number of times, and I've worked with some of your top producers, and you treated everybody very individually. We had a pre-program consult. We called this discovery process, which we do with all clients, and we talked to their direct report. And in this case, it was you at Heffernan. And so we talked with you, and you said, well, this person has X, Y, and Z, but doesn't have A, B, and C. And they have these attributes, but I think we need to work on, these are areas to look for. And so that's very advantageous when I'm working with someone to have that kind of that kind of input. Now, can we do that on forms and through writing and through AI? Yes. I'm not sure if we get the most out of people yet because I haven't tried it. You know, what I mean, it's
Right.
still an unknown. And I know when I work with people, it's very individual, and I know how far I can stretch them and where I can take them, and whether they're holding back or not. I don't know how we get that through AI coaching because I haven't done it, so I can't speak to it. But I think it will help us all streamline better.
Yeah, agreed on this one. You know, you brought up, I want to go to COBE, and I do want to talk about that. I am interested, before we do that, how did you take the leap from being a journalist to an executive coach? When did that happen, and how did that work?
You know, that's so funny. There again, it wasn't my idea. It was one of the large PR firms tapped into me. They called me one day when I was here in LA, and they said, "Could you coach some of our executives for media coaching?" And I said, "Well, I suppose I could. I've never done it before, but I said I could tell you some do's and don'ts and how to and all of that." So I did that it was Hill and Knowlton, and I did that for Hill and Knowlton, large PR firm. And then a company in New York heard about me, and then they tapped me to go under contract with them for a year to coach all their Fortune 500 companies. So I was in a lot of sectors, from pharmaceutical to manufacturing to household name NASA. I mean, just a lot of good companies. And I did that. I ended up having 7 years worth of contracts. So when it was time to sign the next one, I said, I want to do this on my own now, because I said, you like to do presentation and media, which I like too, because I know it. But I said, I want to go into leadership more, because I'm seeing where there's a void in this for leadership, and how to treat people individually to get the most from them. And I just wanted to have that in what I'm doing. And that was as much for me, because I needed something more of a challenge than media and presentation, which I love and still do a lot of, as you know. But I wanted to have that leadership component of it, and they weren't doing that at the company in New York. So I started that, and then I was very fortunate, because people who knew me from television and knew me from my work, they tapped into it. And so they'd say, well, can you coach our executives in this? Can you coach our CEO? And then I would find where some of the challenges were with some of these people, and knew that our skills and my processes could pull out more and help them. And I'll give you an example, like a CFO made CEO. Well, the person was in place for a year, and I got called by the public relations agency and the chairman of the board. And they said, you need to make this person a CEO. It's not working. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, you'll meet the person, see if it's a fit, which it was. So I needed to even get into even how the person dressed. I mean, because the CFO personality is quite different than the CEO personality. And while the person was very, familiar and knew the book and knew the company and the financials and all of that, it was, how to have that commanding presence of a leader, and how to talk to boards, and how to talk to analysts, and how to interact with other leaders, and even through the dress. And I'm not an image consultant, but when I'm working with someone from the inside out, I really want them to look the part of the star they are.
How does that process work? How do you sit down with somebody? Where do you start?
Just almost like what we're doing right here. I mean, really, we have this meeting to see if it's going to be a fit, and it was. And then find out what the goals are. We talk to direct reports, like I've done with you when I'm at Heffernan. What do you need here? What do we want to accomplish here? And then what's really important for anybody who's going to work with any coach anywhere is to make sure that it's not a cookie cutter kind of process, and I know that's cliche and everything, but it's so individual. I mean, what if you were saying, I'm going to be elevated to, president of whatever, and of Heffernan or whatever, and I need to know I'm going to be doing a lot more, probably not anything differently than you're doing right now, but if it were something different, then we'd look on where the challenges were, and so basically we want to eliminate distractions. And when I tell you what I'm going to tell you next, you'll believe me because you know me. But I didn't really get this in the beginning when I started this work, that these high-level executives would say, and this is whether it's media coaching, presentation, preparing them for a keynote, doesn't matter what it is, they would say, I would get notes or emails or whatever, gift sometimes, you gave me confidence. No one gives anybody confidence, in my opinion. What I did was help them discover areas that they weren't confident in, and to be able to take ownership of those areas.
Right. So you mentioned increasing their presence. Do you find that lack of confidence is maybe the most common reason why the presence isn't there?
Very insightful. It absolutely is. Very insightful, Ben, because they just don't have that confidence to be who you are.
That's interesting, because a lot of these individuals were highly skilled, intelligent, right? Well educated. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because and I've studied this quite a bit because I was shocked in the beginning. I thought, here's a CEO who can command, 10,000 people or more to do what they want to do or make the building shake if they walk through the hallways. And I thought, how can they not be confident? But it does go back to being very confident and competent in some areas. But we all have some confidence, some areas where we're just not confident. And so to be able to work with someone so they can take ownership of some of those qualities and techniques and be able to feel they've really, master is a big word, but I say ownership. I don't want anybody to do something because they say, oh, Judy said. Now, it's fine if they say, oh, Judy reminds me I should stand up when I'm doing a presentation or whatever. That's fine. But I really want them to take ownership of where they are, what they're doing. It comes from internal. And then when you can show people, we use videotape a lot. And as you know, when you can show them they've been here and then they go here in a relatively short period of time, even when I'm working with someone like that CEO that was CFO, that was a 3-month process. I mean, not every day, but we would have different, we had different levels and different criteria where we want, it was a constant build. It was constantly going up the ladder and so actually I want to mention that because at the end of that 3-month engagement, we were getting near our contract running out, and I called the chairman of the board, and I said, look, we only got a couple more sessions left here. I need to know how we're doing. He said, well, all I can tell you is that our CFO is acting awfully CEO-ish. and so that was it, so that's what we needed. So that's what we go for.
Do you find, are there any other traits other than maybe lacking confidence that you find that you find on a lot of the individuals that you work with?
Sure,
so, for
Ben.
example, we
Yeah.
talked about dressing today.
The image is a big part of it. Image, and we can talk about, you can go to Silicon Valley, and I worked with people to prepare, teams for their IPOs and things. They said, we still want to we want to have people look like where they are. Someone said, an investor, he said, if I'm going to give you a couple $1 million or $50 million, I want you to look like you know what to do with it. And
It's one of my favorite lines.
Is it? Well,
it is. I say, you got to look like you take $1 million checks.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. And so that's part of it. But also the fact that people don't know. I mean, if you've someone who's always presented with your hands in front of you, like in a prayer position, you don't know that you need to keep your hands loose and you need to have fluid movement, and you don't know that. You don't know about eye contact. You don't know the value of that. I mean, we worked with one executive who was about to be terminated, very high level, and I got a call up in San Francisco, from San Francisco, and said, we have a very abrasive personality here, and we heard that you have a good reputation for this. I said, well, it's not an area we talk about a lot, but we've done quite a bit of this work. He said, well, we have someone who we've had staff complaint, colleague complaint, and now we've had major client complaint. And he said, if this continues, we can't keep this individual, but it's going to cost us between $300,000 and $500,000 for the replacement. So when they said, what do you think? And I said, well, I won't know until I can work with them. But I said, if the person doesn't have some deep-seated psychological issues, chances are we can handle this for you. So long story short, they sent him down one day to work with me. And then they flew him, and I called up to the senior partner, and I said, I need to know how we're doing because you only contracted for 2 days on this program. And he said, well, I don't know. But he said, people are coming into my office and wanting to know. He said, I haven't seen him, but people are coming in and say, what's going on with John Smith? He's so much easier to get along with. So he said, I would suggest we're on the right path.
This was only after 2 days?
1 day.
1 day.
And then the second day, they called me and they said, we want to know what happened in L.A. They said, because the client who was complaining about him, our biggest client, is now singing his praises. What happened? He just did not know, Ben, how to communicate with people. He did not know how to build rapport with people. He did not. And I'm sure you have clients like this. You have some clients that you call and they want you to, Ben, you will say, how was the skiing? How was your trip to France? How are the kids? I understand you're on the college tour. They want all of that kind of conversation, rapport with you. Others just want to know, Ben, when's renewal? What's the price? Who are you sending? What are we doing? Who are we going with? What company do you want us to go with? They just want facts. That's all they want. They don't want any of this rapport building and or emotional intelligence. By the way, you mentioned that word. That's a good word. So, yeah. But some people just don't have that. So some people just don't have awareness of how they're coming across to other people, which is emotional intelligence. And then there's the skill of how to be effective in front of a television camera, how to be effective when you're on a stage, how to own the stage, all of those things, how to walk into a room. Those are all techniques that people just are not aware of. So along with the confidence factor, they just have no idea.
It's interesting. So this individual that you were working with was at least receptive on the front end.
Oh, he just didn't know. He was like a sponge. He said, I just had no idea I had to talk to people like that I had to treat people differently. And he said, because if someone comes in and just says, I mean, like an example, if say that they had to work on a weekend or something and they weren't planning on it. So instead of coming in and saying, Ben, I know you had plans with the kids, your daughter's in college, you were going to, but we have all got to be here because this is a really big deal that's coming down from for our company. Instead of that kind of report, he'd just go in and throw a bunch of papers on the desk and say, everybody needs to be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow. I mean, same message. We still have to be here on a Saturday or a weekend, but he wouldn't build it and he wouldn't get their buy-in. So if you don't get buy-in with people, change is so important today. As you know, we've never had change as fast as it is today. When people are told they have to change, they don't buy into it. When they become part of the process of the change, they buy into it. And that's where a lot of leaders make mistakes.
It's interesting. It's that old saying that star players sometimes aren't star leaders.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And so it sounds like with this individual, he just didn't have the awareness of it. And do you find that's common?
Yes.
It is
yes,
common.
I do. People, listen, I had a conversation. I know I'm in a room with men here, our production team here, and you, with 3 men or 2 men, and it was a lunch. And one of them said to me, "What do you do?" Asked me what my work was, and I said, "Well, we're getting a lot of calls today. In addition to our presentation work media, we're getting a lot of calls now for emotional intelligence." And he looked at me as serious as you and I are, and he said, "What's that?" And so I thought maybe we need to do a course here, So that people are just not aware of how they come across.
Right.
And they're not aware of some of what makes you really stand out. I mean, people who can connect with other people and build rapport with other people. And there's so much talk about authenticity. And as you know, this book, I'm writing a lot about originality because we like people who are just original and don't try to be like everybody else. I like to build on strengths. That's one of my, people always say secret sauce, but I really build on strength with every individual with whom I work, even if we're doing in group. And I worked with some of your people. They're all very different. So the same thing, yes, some of the skills are very basic. Some of the techniques are similar. The foundation is strong. But they all have different personalities that you want to be able to relate to help build on that.
Do you think originality is in short supply? Do you think that people are trying to project an image that they think people want to see and hear versus being themselves?
That's a really good question. I like that question a lot. I mean, you've asked other good questions today, but I don't get asked that question very often. Yeah, I think originality is not as prevalent as it used to be. And I say that to you because it's some of these people, I mean, as you know, I was Larry King, Liberace, Regis Philbin. I mean, these people were, they had Larry King, for instance. Yeah, Larry King was in broadcasting for 50-some years. I don't think we'll see that again. First of all, everybody wants what's next now. We're very, we're just on this constant, with technology, devices. You have this iWatch this year. You want a new iWatch next year. The new model. We're very what's next all the time, and it goes so fast. So I don't know that we'll see that kind of longevity. But people really stood out to me in those days. Like just so original.
Right.
And I think some of it's because everybody is trying to fit in. And I really feel for the Gen Zs because that generation, it's so much more. I mean, it's social media. There's so much pressure, and that I think that conformity is probably so much expected now, as opposed to the originals who really stood out.
So for my daughter and her friends, right, that are at school and college, what would you give them that advice to be themselves? So what advice would you give? What advice would you give to a 22-year-old?
Well, I do. In fact, I have a young'un, as Oprah calls them, in my office right now. And I said, you need to find what IQG. You need to find that part of your life, that innate quality that you have. And I said, you're just young, you're just learning, but explore. You have the opportunity to walk through many doors of opportunity and explore who you are and what you are. But don't try to be, the comparison trap and. People talk the imposter. It's just we're trying to compare all the time, and I think being who you are. You might. Remember when Adele first started? Adele didn't look like she wasn't trying to, and she still isn't. She's not trying to be Pink, who's on a trapeze. Or Lady Gaga, who her meat costume when she first got.
Right.
She was true to who she was. And so are these performers. But I think don't be afraid to stand out because if you look like, sound like, and act like everyone else, you're probably not going to be the star that you could be.
Right. That's so right. What would you also say to those younger individuals when it comes to taking career risks and looking at a career and thinking about where they want to go, what they want to do in life?
I say try as much as you can. Try as many opportunities. Learn as much as you can wherever you are. Contribute as much as you can. Be a resource. Don't just do what's expected of you. Because when you're, I mean, I remember like me when I was like would be the Gen Z today of this generation. I didn't know I was going to be on television. It wasn't any of these things I planned, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, but the opportunities were there. And so when people see something in you, and you and I have had this talk before, there are people that was a law firm that we worked with. They had 2 stars, rising stars. Both were women, and they wanted me to work with them independently and take them through this whole star power process: how to walk, how to talk, how to look the part, how to deliver speeches, because they thought they could really represent their firm, in the legal profession very well and become the go-to experts for media interviews. Both of these young women turned it down because they didn't want to do it. And it wasn't because they didn't want to do the opportunity, but they were just getting married. One wanted to start a family, one had a family, one to start another. She said, I don't want to be a star here. I just want to do my job. And so there are some people who are very, and that's great that they knew that, and they didn't.
Right.
They said, we don't think we should take the firm's investment in us to do that. So I really respected them for that. But with younger people, especially just getting out of college, there's so many opportunities out there. And wherever you are, work with people you like. I'm not suggesting job hop and not be a contributor, but when you have opportunities, if your boss comes to you and says, hey, Ben, I think that, you've been doing a great job here, but I think you're ready to go to this level, take that opportunity, because if someone's seeing it in you, you probably have it.
Right.
But take the opportunity.
Right.
And gosh, if I have one message, it's don't settle. If you think you can do more, if you think you're worth more, if you think you contribute more, can contribute more, do it.
Right. I think that the role of a mentor as well, somebody that can give good advice to a young professional, is extremely important. It was something that I didn't have when I was younger, and I find that now as I'm a little bit older, I like when people ask for advice. I altruistically want to give advice, not make the same mistakes I made.
You're such a good, I know this too, not just because we're friends, but I know how you work with your employees, and I know how they think of you. Because you weren't even in the building when they were singing, when I was doing some coaching the last time a few months ago with your team. A couple of days I was there. You were there one of the days, but you weren't there most of the time. And they all talked about, I'll tell you, they're not listening, but I'll tell you, they all talked about how much they like you and your stories and how you work with them. And I think that's one of your attributes.
I think being relatable, I think that just being honest and relatable with individuals, especially younger people, I think is really important, because we're human beings, and we all make the same mistakes, and we're all just trying really hard to be a good person and do well at work. And
that's right.
And sometimes I think that gets lost.
Yeah.
In leadership books and people trying to help people's careers.
That's what the AI, like you talked about with coaching and everything. And I was thinking about, I didn't want to interrupt, but I was thinking about Phil Jackson. And you and I have talked about this before, that Phil, when I interviewed him, honestly, sitting next to him, I thought he was going to get smarter. He's so smart. I thought, I'm going to get some of this while I'm here. And I didn't talk to him about basketball, because everybody does. But I talked to him what it's like to lead, to coach these mega stars already. And, as you know, there was Michael Jordan and, of course, Kobe and Shaq, and they were all star players. And Phil has 11 NBA rings to showcase his stars, that he did it. And I said, how do you do this? And he said, you treat them very individually. You want them as a team, but and for instance, he would give you one book, and he would give, Mark another book, and he'd give Tanner another book, and Judy a different book. It wouldn't be the same book. He really worked with them very individually to pull on their strengths.
Right. And you gave me the book, Sacred Hoops.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
What an amazing book.
Yeah, that's my
favorite. I learned a lot on that.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
I did. You shared great books with me.
Yeah. I gave you a new book recently. I haven't read. It's not a great idea to give somebody a book you haven't read to recommend it, but I love the cover of it so much. That book on personality,
No, I haven't started it.
I haven't either. I didn't order mine yet because I want you to give me feedback. So now you're under pressure to read it and give me a book review.
I will. I'll use AI.
That'd be great.
They help me write it.
Yeah. But you and I that's what's just a treat to go in your offices. Anytime I go into your office, I like to go into not just your location, not just the physical place where the whole company is, but I like to go into your personal office so I can see what's on your bookshelf.
We read a lot of the same books.
Yeah, we do. But I get ideas from some of your books. I think, I have to read that,
Are you reading anything good right now?
No, I'm writing right now. And so while I'm writing, I can't read. So I'm writing my new book. And so right now, I'm any free time that I have, any time that I can carve out a block of time. I still read the Wall Street Journal in New York, the New York Times, Wall Street. But if I can block out time to write, that's where I am right now. And I have to get married to my writing time right now.
What's your process?
Right now, first we did the storyboard, and then I'm doing the chapters, I'm doing the table of contents, and then I'm going to record what I want to talk about. And it's at the high level people I've met, what I've learned, how you can apply. And so then I will record it, and then I will take it to an editor and refine that what I did there, and I'll do it too. And then I will probably record it again. I haven't done this yet though, the recording part of it. Last time I just wrote it. This will be my third book. And so one was for a client, which some things you never know you'll never do again. That's one of them, is write a client's book. But he took 2 companies public. It was a big deal. And I did his life story documentary. But writing someone else's book is really a challenge because yours, yours, and of course nonfiction. But I will when this book is really ready for the right editor, I just want to get all the drafts done. And I didn't do the transcribing last time, but I will this time because that'll help me get clear on whether my stories are clear, whether there's too much, not enough, what people can they duplicate it. I want people to be able to read this book and say, gee, this is what made Oprah successful. I can do X, Y, Z. Not that they're going to be the next Oprah Winfrey, but they can learn how to be more curious, for instance. I mean, Oprah asks good questions. Barbara Walters asks good questions. Larry King asks good questions. And I'm a good interviewer. That's my strength. And people who are curious. And so there's just things that people can get from that to say, hey, I can be a better leader. My team's got to have this book. So that's what it's about. So right now I'm not reading anything. So you'll have to give me all the book reviews for a while because writing is have you written a book? I don't think you have.
No, but I'm fascinated in how to do it.
Well, I'm not the person to ask because I've written one. One was Media Star Power, and that's how to do great media interviews. And then one was for my client. And now this one is more of a commercial book. I mean, the other one for media was more for my clients and internal because, the media is not going to interview me on how to tell people teaching people how to talk to them. But this one, so that was more of a trade professional book. But this one is more commercial book because we've talked to a couple mainstream publishers about it, and they're interested. So we'll see.
Well, you've lived an interesting life. I mean, we have a lot of lessons to give.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I mean, you're a people person. I'm a people person, and there's a wonderful author I do like though, Ben. If you haven't read his book, David Brooks. And he's written a couple of ones about character, and the other one I forget the title on. I started it, I haven't finished it. It's about people really seeing you, and it's about really showing up, and it's what he didn't have, and how to connect with people, and how he's working to be more of a people person. And I'm kind of giving you the shorthand version of it. But I like David Brooks. He writes for I think a New York Magazine or New York Times, I guess. But I like his work a lot.
I don't think I've read any of it.
Writer, very thoughtful. Oh well.
Yeah, there's another.
Have to add another gift book for you, coming right up.
If you were to talk somebody into writing a book or talk somebody out of writing a book, what would you say?
I would say if you think you have something good that's going to help other people, if your book's going to make a contribution. Now, there again, if someone's got an idea for a fiction book, I couldn't help them. But if you have the idea for it, I guess you and I would just say, just do it. We're kind of like Nike, in that respect. Just do it. If you think you have something to say. But when people say, I know I want to write a book, but I don't know what it's about, I say, well, figure that out and then think about it. If you don't know what you want to write about, right now I have 4 books that are on my queue that I want to write. I just need to get this first one done. And then that's my promise to myself, get this one done. And then there's spinoffs from that. And then there's some other books that I want to write on presentation. I want to update my Media Star Power book, some things like that. So, but if you don't know what you want to write about, and you just think, I have a book in me, well, don't make a publisher try to find it because they're not going to look.
Yeah. So we've got a few minutes left. I'd like to talk about COBE.
Oh,
we saved the best for last.
Yeah, thank you. COBE, my collaboration of brilliant entrepreneurs. And that came about because I was in a coaching program. And see, there again, this wasn't my idea. I keep saying, this wasn't my idea. This is like the third big thing in my life that's happened to me. So listen to that, everybody. There's so many things that could happen to you when you're open to it, and just what other people see in you. And so I was in a coaching program, and I was in it for about 10 years. And you might say, well, didn't you get it? Yes, I did get it, and very process-driven, and so is COBE. And then when our coach quit, 2 people came up independent of each other and said, we don't care because we know where we're getting our coaching. And I thought, I better take some of the coaching that I've been doing for these executives in transformational leadership and performance improvement and all of that, revenue. And I thought, I better take some of those skills, processes, put them together. And so I did. And I took 2 years off and wrote my processes to launch COBE. And then I started telling people about it. And it stands for Collaboration of Brilliant Entrepreneurs. So we launched the COBE Coach. And now we're launching a new group, and it may even be launched by the time this podcast airs. So we're launching, and we're looking for entrepreneurs, Ben, who are already successful. It's not someone who's just been let go from their job and put a sign on the door, my name on the door. No, it's for people who have challenges with delegation, developing their decision style, looking for putting a team together, creating a culture, how to elevate, how to have implementation. Look for the team that can get things done. Because if you're just doing everything yourself, which a lot of entrepreneurs tend to do, and boy, that's a strong lesson. Entrepreneurs not only they know they have a good idea, and not only are the risk takers and the bone of what's happening. I mean, there's so many entrepreneurs today. However, because you can do a lot of things well, doesn't mean you should do a lot of things well. And if you want to scale and grow, don't try to do it all yourself. And then, as you know, COBE is a very collaborative environment. People get together one day a quarter just to focus on their business, not putting out fires. I mean, they're there that day to concentrate. How do I want to grow? How do I want to develop? Who do I want to hire? Maybe who do I want to fire? I mean, there's a lot of things that come out of there. And then you get the opportunity to hear from other people with their best practices.
Right, because sometimes the individuals don't have the outlet to talk about problems or make decisions.
Well, to borrow your phrase, it can be lonely at the top, and it can be. It can be very lonely at the top. And so when you hear other people who are going through similar areas, and some of our COBE members, one entrepreneur has 3 businesses. Another one, he had two employees. And by the way, before I tell the story, he had 2 employees when he came to COBE. I don't take any credit for this, but now he's got 40, and so 45, and he's in 25,000 square feet of offices. But there again, it's that commitment to himself and accountability. And then when he comes in and shares, he's very motivating for other people. And in fact, I'm seeing him next week. So yeah, I like my entrepreneurs. So we're looking, when we add people to COBE, they really need to be people who are established, and that can be a startup, but they're really committed to growth, scaling, and developing their company more. And you know what happens along the way? You cannot help but grow personally while you're growing professionally, and vice versa.
Right, and also a high degree of positivity as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you said that about COBE.
It's one of the underestimated qualities of successful people. You have to be positive.
Well,
and that's something that you do. You naturally are positive. That's why I really like COBE for that reason. Right. You're not only, it's not only your program, but you're also a really good coach. Without even really trying.
Thank you. Oh, that's a great compliment. I'm going to use that. You've given me 2 superb compliments. You know that? Pardon us while we just talk among ourselves right here for a minute. But you give me 2 really good. You said that multi-generational, because I work with the youngins.
You communicate really well.
Thank you. But I like them. That's the whole thing. But that's why you and I like each other so well, separate from our work together, is that because when we go to dinner, by the way, we're overdue, but when we go to dinner, it's really wonderful, Ben, because you're so positive. And I look at what you've done with your life. And you're one of the people, by the way, so few people in life do what they say they're going to do. When you tell me you're going to do something, you do it. And you can just take it to the bank, as that expression goes. And that's how some of our COBE members are. They say they're going to do it, and they do it. And that's one of your strengths. And you are very positive. That's why it's always fun to see you. It's always fun to see you. And I never like conversations to end when we're having a conversation.
This is so true. It's amazing too, Judy. You said, your husband Stan said, "What are you going to talk about?" And you said, "We'll figure it out." We just did an hour.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it was fun. And then now I wish I were interviewing you, because now I have so many things to ask you about, because it's so impressive what you've done with your life and your career. So,
Judy, I appreciate that. Where can people find you?
They can find me at Judy Jernudd, which is JER, and as in Nancy, UDD, JudyJernudd.com, Judy@JudyJernudd.com. They can also call us and schedule a time with me. My assistant will book that. You want my phone number?
Sure.
Okay, 310-215-9975. 310-215-9975. Hey, thanks for that opportunity, Ben, because we are launching our new COBE groups. But it's exciting to me to bring these entrepreneurs together and watch what they do. And it's easy to coach because COBE's process driven, but it's easy to see what people implement. And then being accountable for that one day to yourself, not to me and not to the other members, but to yourself, that one day I am giving myself the gift of this day to focus on my business, what I want to accomplish personally and professionally. It's just invaluable, and I love being a part of that, a small part of it. I love my members. I can't wait to see them every time.
Judy, I cannot agree more. And I was thinking about this podcast today. You truly are the world's most interesting person.
Oh,
I appreciate you coming on today.
I don't need PR agent. I just go to Ben and say, "Hey, Ben, you say it all for us." If anybody wants to know what it's like to work with you, we'll say, go see Ben Stern. Ben, this has been I mean, it's been so much fun. And when Stan did ask, he said, what are you two going to talk about? I said, I have no idea, but I know we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we did. I appreciate it. I hope everybody else found it interesting.
It was fabulous. Thank you so much. I loved it.
Thanks, Judy.
Okay, bye.